Rain-slicked streets reflected the dim glow of the village lamps. But the shadows between them seemed alive, shifting with a sinister intent. A sense of unease clawed at the journalist's chest as he stepped off the bus, his recorder trembling in his hand. Whispers floated on the wind, unintelligible yet urgent, as if the village itself was trying to warn him away. The houses were old, with peeling paint and shuttered windows that seemed to watch him as he passed. Each step echoed unnaturally, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the deserted streets. The air tasted metallic, like blood, and carried the faint scent of charred wood from some forgotten fire. Villagers appeared suddenly, faces pale and eyes wide with unspoken fear, retreating into doorways at his approach. They spoke in hushed tones about disappearances, their voices trembling like leaves in a storm. One old man muttered, "They opened the gate, and nothing comes back the same." Curiosity burned in the journalist's veins, despite the growing dread that pressed down on him. He pressed further, asking questions, recording answers, each word more chilling than the last. A child stared at him from a window, eyes black and unblinking, disappearing before he could look away. Shadows lengthened unnaturally as night fell, crawling across walls as if they were alive. He felt watched from every corner, every alleyway harboring eyes that didn't belong to humans. Footsteps echoed behind him, but whenever he turned, the street lay empty and silent. The village church loomed ahead, its bell tower crooked and jagged against the storm-dark sky. Inside, the air was thick with incense, and something fouler, a metallic taste that made his stomach churn. Candle flames flickered violently, casting dancing specters across walls lined with ancient symbols. A chilling wind whispered through the broken windows, carrying faint chants that were neither human nor animal. The sound burrowed into his mind, filling him with images of rituals he could not comprehend. His hands shook as he lifted the recorder, capturing every terrifying echo. He found the first clues of the cult, a circle etched in dried blood, symbols that seemed to writhe beneath his gaze. Fear gripped him, yet fascination rooted him to the spot. Each mark hinted at something ancient, powerful, and malevolent waiting to be awakened. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted faces of villagers gathered in the square. Their mouths moved silently, their eyes empty, as though possessed by something far older than themselves. He stumbled back, heart hammering, realizing the horror he had stepped into could not be escaped easily. The whispers grew louder, merging into a chorus of voices that seemed to speak directly to him. He felt his own mind bending, memories twisting into nightmares not his own. Something terrible was stirring, and he was already entangled in its awakening. The wind howled through the village, carrying with it the stench of decay and fear. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, yet his curiosity chained him to the path of darkness. He could feel the ritual's shadow stretching, reaching for him even now. By the time he reached the outskirts, the storm had settled, leaving a suffocating stillness in its wake. The village seemed to breathe round him, alive with secrets it would never willingly share. And somewhere deep within, the first flickers of an ancient evil waited, patient and hungry. The grimoire lay on a cracked wooden table, bound in leather that seemed to pulse faintly under his trembling hands. Dust rose in spirals as he opened it, the pages yellowed and brittle, filled with symbols that writhed like snakes. Each word seemed alive, whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of his mind. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the book was more than ink, and paper. It was a gateway. The instructions were meticulous and horrifying, describing chants, bloodletting, and sacrifices designed to call forth entities older than the earth. His fingers hovered over a page, depicting grotesque figures emerging from fire and shadow, and he shivered despite himself. The journalist's recorder captured every rustle of the pages, every creak of the floorboards beneath him. Outside, the wind shrieked, as if the village itself was reacting to the discovery. Shadows shifted in unnatural ways, creeping along walls and corners, watching, waiting. He turned another page, revealing a map etched with circles and lines that radiated like veins. The locations were familiar places he had walked, streets and squares that now seemed sinister in their normality. Each mark hinted at a ritual already in motion, an awakening that he had stumbled into unknowingly. A sudden gust blew through the open window, scattering papers across the floor. The grimoire's pages fluttered, as if alive, settling on an illustration that made his stomach churn. A figure, cloaked in shadow, knelt before a great fiery gate, its eyes glowing with a malevolent hunger. Fear battled with fascination, keeping him rooted in place as the words seeped into his mind. He could almost hear whispers of the cult, their voices entwining with the book's own dark resonance. Each sentence he read etched dread into his consciousness, a slow, unstoppable descent into terror. Outside, the village seemed quieter now, as if holding its breath. A distant bell tolled, uneven and hollow, echoing through streets that now felt alive with unseen watchers. He could not shake the feeling that eyes were following him, burning into his skull with intent. He skimmed further, finding warnings ignored by the centuries. The ritual demanded more than belief. It required blood, devotion, and the corruption of innocence. He realized with growing horror that this was not just a story, but a blueprint for catastrophe. Every illustration, every word, seemed to pulse with urgency, demanding action. The idea of completing the ritual filled him with dread, yet a perverse curiosity gnawed at him relentlessly. His rational mind screamed to stop, but something deeper, older, urged him to continue. The room grew colder, the shadows thicker, swallowing the corners in blackness. He felt a presence behind him, something observing, intelligent, patient. It was not human, and it did not blink, yet it communicated fear directly into his mind. Lightning illuminated the room, revealing the symbols glowing faintly on the pages. A sudden nausea overtook him, the sensation of being drawn into the book itself. He closed the grimoire hastily, but the whispers did not stop. They followed him, insistent and cruel. As he left the church, the wind carried faint chants and footsteps that were not his own. The ritual was no longer a story to report. Tip was a reality creeping toward life, waiting for someone to unleash it. And somewhere deep in the shadows, eyes older than the world watched, calculating, patient, unstoppable. The night had grown heavier, pressing against his chest like an invisible weight. Shadows seemed to crawl along the walls, twisting into shapes that were almost human but not quite. Every corner of the village breathed with unseen life, and the wind carried whispers that spoke directly to his mind. Footsteps echoed behind him, soft and deliberate. Yet whenever he spun around, the street lay empty and still. A chill seeped into his bones, and his heart pounded like a drum in a hollow tomb. The sense of being watched was no longer imagination. It was a certainty, a predator closing in. The children in the windows stared at him with black, hollow eyes, their faces expressionless, yet burning with silent warnings. He shivered and stumbled backward, realizing that these were not ordinary children, but vessels of some creeping darkness. Their whispers merged with the wind, chanting words he could not fully comprehend. A low hum began to emanate from the village square, vibrating through the ground beneath his feet. He knelt briefly to steady himself, feeling the tremors pulse through his body. The hum grew louder, morphing into a chorus of voices crying in anguish and ecstasy simultaneously. Lightning struck the church tower, illuminating grotesque symbols etched into the stone that had previously gone unnoticed. Shadows writhed within the carvings, like living things trapped in stone, desperate to escape. The journalist realized the ritual's power was awakening, even without human hands completing it. Figures appeared in the mist, cloaked and faceless, moving with unnatural precision. Each step left a scorched mark on the cobblestones, black smoke curling upward in eerie spirals. Fear paralyzed him, yet his curiosity pushed him to follow, compelled by a mixture of dread and necessity. The wind carried the smell of decay, sharp and metallic, and he gagged instinctively. Something unseen brushed against his neck, a cold presence that made his skin crawl. He spun, but the street remained deserted, silent, and mocking. A mirror in a nearby shop window reflected not his own face, but a gaunt, hollow-eyed figure screaming silently. He stumbled backward, the echo of the silent scream embedding itself into his mind. Panic surged, yet he could not tear himself away from the horrifying reflection. The ground beneath him cracked, faintly at first, then more aggressively, like the earth itself was breathing. A deep growl reverberated through the village, primal and ancient, shaking the foundations of every building. He realized that forces older than humanity were stirring, observing, and preparing to act. Faint lights flickered in the distance, as if torches were being carried by invisible hands. Shapes moved in the shadows, approaching yet always just out of reach. The air grew thick, heavy with an oppressive dread that made every breath a struggle. He tried to speak, to call out to anyone, but no sound emerged from his throat. The world seemed to warp around him, angles bending, shadows deepening, and reality losing its boundaries. He understood, with a clarity that terrified him, that the ritual's influence was spreading, and nothing would remain the same. A sudden scream shattered the night, echoing from somewhere deep within the village. It was a sound of pure agony, unnatural and endless, piercing through his mind like a blade. He fell to his knees, clutching his head, knowing that the darkness had fully arrived, and he was trapped within its growing embrace.